In the previous episode, our boy Lu Sheng had a moment to reflect on his feelings for Snowy in the bar with Chin. But let's just say, Snowy's brother wasn't exactly Lu Sheng's biggest fan. But we all know that didn't matter. Then the three of them decided to venture into the cavern to collect some beast samples. Now, let's check in on Lu Sheng. He was standing on the edge of an S-level cavern, gazing down from the cliff. The last time he dived into one of these, it was at night. Creepy vibes all around. This time, though, it was broad daylight, so it didn't look quite as much like a horror movie set. Still, the air was thick with the stench of blood, but that didn't really bother him. To him, fear was for the weak. In his world, all those so-called terrifying monsters were just smoke and mirrors. There wasn't much that couldn't be handled with a single punch. And if there was, well, 2 punches would definitely do the trick. But he couldn't help but be a little curious. Would this cavern's depths hide that same mysterious presence from last time? Was that creepy consciousness just a one-time thing? Or did every cavern have its own version of it? Not that he was worried, of course. The last time he poked around, he figured out that whatever that thing was, it was basically a paper tiger. Scary looking, but ultimately harmless. And besides, even if it was some kind of big shot, it couldn't break out of the fissure anyway. Otherwise, why would it be trying to lure him in with such cheap tricks? As he landed softly on the first level, he let his psychic power stretch out, scanning the surroundings. But then, an unexpected thought popped into his head. What was Snowy up to? Meanwhile, back with the trio, Dong Shengyi's sword sliced through the air, and a massive beast slowly split right down the middle. He sheathed his blade with a flourish, while Lin Wanwan cheered from behind. After a quick psychic sweep of the area, Snowy confirmed there were no other beasts nearby, and gave Wanwan the all-clear to start collecting samples. Wanwan dropped her backpack and pulled out some gear. Mask, gloves, the whole setup. She got right to work, carefully drawing blood samples from the beast, her eyes wide with admiration. "No wonder it's a level 7 beast," she muttered, clearly impressed by the strength of its blood. Meanwhile, Dong Shengyi stood by, ever the philosopher warrior. The real strength of a martial artist lies in the body. Every part of it is the perfect weapon, he declared, as if imparting ancient wisdom. He couldn't resist throwing a little shade at the General Stars, who, in his opinion, relied too much on flashy gear. Dong Shengyi, on the other hand, prided himself on mastering melee weapons to push his physical limits. "Honestly, if I didn't want to clear the path faster, I wouldn't even bother with a blade," he added, striking a pose that he probably thought looked super cool. But then he glanced at the blood pooling on the ground, his expression turning to disgust. Ugh, filthy stuff. Snowy, still busy scanning the surroundings with her psychic powers, didn't even bother looking his way. "Either help Wanwan with the samples or zip them. No one here wants to hear your self-important lectures," she shot back, not missing a beat. Dong Shengyi's face froze for a split second, but then he shook his head and let out a little huff, pouting like a kid who just got scolded. Lin Wanwan quickly finished gathering her samples and called out to the others. "All right, let's get moving." The journey that followed was smooth sailing. Dong Shengyi's strength was undeniable. He made quick work of any beast that crossed their path, cutting them down with single, decisive strikes. Snowy kept a close eye on her brother, thinking that with a powerful martial artist like him around, she should feel both relieved and proud. But as her thoughts drifted to the challenges that Lu Sheng might face afterward, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation. If only that guy got hurt in the cavern. One dangerous thought popped into her mind out of nowhere, and a twisted expression briefly crossed her face. She could clearly see a fissure not far away, but when Dong Shengyi almost walked right into it, she instinctively wanted to warn him, but almost as if something in her mind stopped her. Just as he was about to step into the danger zone, Dong Shengyi suddenly pulled back, stopping just in time. He turned to her with a mix of frustration and panic, asking her why she hadn't warned him. If he hadn't reacted so fast, he could have been a goner. Snowy kept her expression neutral, acting like nothing was amiss, simply replied she didn't see it while brushing off the close call. Besides, with such a small gap, he wouldn't die even if he fell in. Maybe just get a little banged up. Dong Shengyi was completely shocked that those words had come from his own sister. He felt a pang in his heart, looking quite hurt. Swallowing his anger, he turned away, not saying another word. Wanwan, too, glanced between them and looked a bit shocked. As they continued deeper into the cavern, Dong Shengyi kept slashing through beasts, but he found himself narrowly avoiding the fissures more and more often. Each time, he barely escaped by the skin of his teeth. Frustrated, he finally shouted at Snowy, "What's going on with you? Are you trying to get me killed?" But Snowy remained calm, almost too calm, and kept replying how she didn't see it. Now truly angry, Dong Shengyi pointed ahead, his voice rising, saying, "That's nonsense. He believes that she did it on purpose since it was her who insisted he go this way." But Snowy just said she'll be more careful next time. Not a hint of regret appeared on her face. Dong Shengyi looked at his sister, suddenly feeling like she was a stranger. It was terrifying. She wasn't even married yet, and she was already so ruthless. His lips quivered in frustration, and he couldn't help but point at her, voice trembling, saying she was not even married, and she was already turning on her own brother. What's going to happen in the future if she's like this now? Wan walked past Dong Shengyi, giving him a sympathetic look, telling him to take care. He shook his head in disappointment, warning Wan, telling her to never ever end up like this, saying how Snowy's hearts turned pitch black, but Snowy acted like she hadn't heard a word. By now, the three of them had reached the 34th floor of the cavern. The beasts they encountered were growing stronger and more numerous, and Dong Shengyi began to struggle a bit. This time, he nearly stumbled into another fissure, but it was way too close. The thing sliced through his waist, tearing a bit of his clothes. He shot a serious look at his sister, warning her, enough with the games, saying if he gets hurt here, all three of them could die. There are plenty of level 8 beasts down here. For the first time, Snowy's expression turned serious. She insisted she didn't see it. Dong Shengyi was about to argue when she pointed ahead, saying how she really didn't see it this time, telling the two that the fissure wasn't there before. It must have just appeared. This could be very problematic. After she finished talking, there was a heavy silence. Snowy turned around, only to find both of them staring at her like she'd just grown a second head. Wan had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide in disbelief, while Dong Shengyi looked utterly shocked, like his whole world had just been flipped upside down. Wan finally found her voice, albeit shaky. You really didn't see it this time? But what about earlier?" She trailed off, didn't want to finish the question. Dong Shengyi, on the other hand, was on the verge of a meltdown. His lips trembled as he struggled to speak. This was his own sister. He was so angry he looked like he might have a stroke right then and there. Even Snowy, usually so composed, felt a flush of embarrassment creep up her cheeks. Trying to brush off the awkwardness, she cleared her throat and changed the subject, saying they have a bigger problem. New fissures popping up like this are usually a sign that the cavern might go through an uprising. Thus they need to get out of here now. An S-level cavern uprising is no joke. Wan looked torn, saying they were still missing a few samples. Dong Shengyi, still fuming, waved his hand dismissively, telling the two to go ahead and finish up. But from now on, don't expect him to believe a word Snowy says anymore. The group continued onward, with an uneasy silence hanging over them. Time passed, and soon enough, Lu Sheng found himself on the 35th level of the cavern. He stifled a yawn, already bored when a beast tried to ambush him from behind. Without even turning around, he casually lifted a hand and sent the creature's eyeballs flying with a single flick. Having seen the Baldy and the team collect samples a few times, he figured he'd give it a shot too. Whenever he ran into a strong beast, he'd collect some marrow and blood, just for kicks. But then, out of nowhere, a wave of unease washed over him. Lu Sheng paused, rubbing his temples as the signal from his immortal cells grew stronger. What could it mean? He thought it over, then a sudden realization hit him. Could it be? Lu Sheng put down his spear and took a few steps forward. But that uneasy feeling only grew stronger. This wasn't just some baseless hunch. He knew better than that. Something was definitely off, and he needs to figure out what's going on. Closing his eyes, he channeled his psychic power, tapping into what some might call martial instincts. These abilities were designed to keep martial artists out of dangerous situations or from encountering unbeatable foes. But with his immortal cells amplifying this power, he tends to have more accurate predictions. Yet, Lu Sheng couldn't tell if the threat was directed at him or someone close to him. He ran through the list of people he cared about. Both of his parents, his younger sister, Snowy, Qin, Ming, and a few more others. He racked his brain but couldn't pinpoint the source of this looming danger. Being on the 35th level of the cavern, his phone had long since lost signal, which only added to his worry. If only he could call someone, but all he could do was trust his instincts, which seemed to be urging him to move forward. Lu Sheng decided against backtracking. He trusted his gut, and the mithril gold mine should be not far away. The faster he wrapped this up, the better. He stopped collecting beast samples and made a beeline for the mithril gold. When he found it, he started smashing through the mine with his spear, each strike sending huge chunks of stone flying. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that the ominous presence he'd sensed in the previous cavern wasn't here. Maybe this also means there won't be many of those martial maniacs either, also confirming his suspicion that the caverns weren't connected. But just as he was making headway, a beast suddenly appeared behind him. Lu Sheng turned, giving it a cold, hard stare. With a swift swing of his spear, the beast's head was separated from its body, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. A loud rumble echoed in the distance, and a group of people crouched over a beast's corpse, busy collecting the materials. All looked up simultaneously. The noise caught their attention, and they quickly decided to check it out. Meanwhile, another man stood atop the massive corpse of a powerful level 8 beast. But even with this victory, he couldn't shake the shadow of his recent defeat by Dong Shengyi. He was still haunted by it, unable to understand how his opponent could be so strong. Dong Shengyi's combat power wasn't that much greater than his own, so why couldn't he even withstand a single attack? The more he dwelled on it, the angrier he became, taking out his frustration on any beast unfortunate enough to cross his path. He should have felt proud for taking down a level 8 beast on his own, but instead, his irritation only grew. Suddenly, the distant sound interrupted his train of thought, shattering what was left of his patience. He cursed loudly. "Who the hell is making all that noise? Can't they tell I'm in a bad mood?" With a deep breath, he headed toward the source of the disturbance. Back with Lu Sheng, chunks of mithril gold were raining down, and he couldn't help but feel satisfied with the haul. But the never-ending stream of beasts, mostly level 7s and 8s, kept pouring in, each one more eager to ruin his day than the last. But none of the beasts could get close to him, only to be sent away by his psychic power without even breaking a sweat. Despite the rich harvest, he was alone and had to figure out how to haul it all back himself. In hindsight, he thought, he should have brought the team along. Suddenly, that unsettling feeling hit him again, like a tight grip around his heart, almost as if someone important to him was about to face a serious threat. He could feel it in his bones. The signal was clear. Abandoning any thoughts of extracting more mithril gold, Lu Sheng decided it was time to leave. But just as he was about to make his exit, several figures appeared in front of him. Their eyes widened at the sight of the gleaming mithril gold floating around and behind him. Their breath quickening with greed flashed in their eyes. Without even acknowledging Lu Sheng, one of them bent down to snatch up a piece that had fallen to the ground. Watching them, Lu Sheng couldn't help but be reminded of stray cats and dogs eyeing a meal he was carrying home. He knew exactly what they were thinking, and had no desire to waste time here. Telling them that they can have what's left, just step aside and let him pass. The bald man who had picked up the mithril gold chuckled, turning to Lu Sheng with a sly grin, saying, "Come on, brother, don't joke around." Believed Lu Sheng made such a ruckus digging that it's drawn all kinds of beasts their way. Since this left them no time to keep mining, he wanted Lu Sheng to share what he already gathered. The others began closing in on Lu Sheng, surrounding him. "You must have been mistaken. But either way, you have lost your only chance." His voice cold and measured as he took a step forward. "Say that again." Sensing his aura, they quickly took a few steps back, realizing that they might have just messed with the wrong person. Just then, another person came over, his gaze fixed on Lu Sheng, asking if he was the one who attracted all those beasts. Suddenly, the group around Lu Sheng immediately recognized the newcomer, and a few of them even called out his name in awe. The man's cold eyes swept over the group, asking if they know who he is. They quickly bowed, practically falling over themselves in respect. Saying, of course, the man was the second ranked on the General Star list, famous across the entire Eastern Military District. Who wouldn't know him? Unfortunately, these dumbasses didn't seem to recognize the real danger around here. Another voice cut in unexpectedly, questioning if anyone here also know who he is. Everyone turned to see Lu Sheng standing there, one hand gripping his spear, the other holding a chunk of mithril gold. The man just chuckled, clearly unimpressed. He didn't see Lu Sheng as a threat at all. He never heard of him, and he didn't care to know. He said dismissively, cracking his neck and flexing his wrists, telling them that he was in a really bad mood, and it was Lu Sheng who pissed him off. He gave him a deal, either leave all his stuff or never leave here. As he stepped closer, the others in the group instinctively backed away, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. Seeing the chunk of mithril gold dropped from Lu Sheng's hands, the man smiled, thinking Lu Sheng was about to surrender. "Smart move," he started to say. But before he could finish, Lu Sheng cut him off. "Do any of you have any real martial instincts, or are they just for show?" He clearly sounded irritated. He was already in a hurry and on edge, and now these idiots were getting in his way. His gaze sharpened, eyes glinting with a killing intent while looking at the man in front of him.